Absolutely.
Do you hear this a lot?
Well, no, this is a really important issue.
Okay.
And so there's two things, Dawn. One of them is just to ease your administrative burden a little bit, but it's not going to save you any money. And that is that we are finally, council agreed with me a couple of years ago to phase out the business tax, because right now businesses pay two taxes. You pay your non-residential property tax and you pay a separate business tax just to be a business.
Right.
And so we're phasing out the separate business tax and incorporating it into the non-residential property tax, which isn't going to save anybody any money because it's revenue neutral, but it will at least ease the administrative burden. The bigger issue...
Let me interrupt for 1 second there. So what we're doing is the business tax that we would have paid is now going back to the landlord as non-residential tax, and the landlord adds 15% onto that.
Well, they're not supposed to do that, but
Right.
and we had lots of long negotiations with landlords before we went into this. It's one of the reasons why there's such a long phase-in period. It's a 7-year phase-in period, was precisely so that the landlords couldn't get away with those sorts of shenanigans. But the core issue is even worse than that, which is that the property tax is a horrible way to tax people. It's regressive and it's unfair for residents, and it's much worse for businesses. Because right now, the only taxation that we have access to is property tax. So we have to tax you on the rents if you don't own it, because we're trying to guess what the value of your asset is, of your businesses, the rental value. And that's not right.
Of course it's not right, because someone might get a better deal than me, and
Absolutely.
we're trying to entice American retailers, and they get a break, and some
they pay
of
less
us small
than you.
guys are ending up paying more in business tax than some of the larger operators in the mall.
You're exactly right. And think of this. If I'm a business in Mission on 4th Street, and I was flooded out and I was closed for 3 months, and I own my building, well, the value of my building probably hasn't changed. So my taxes this year will be the same as last year, even though I lost 3 months of revenue. I think that's fundamentally unfair. I don't like wealth taxes or asset taxes to begin with, and I think it's particularly unfair for businesses. So part of our conversation with the province, as you alluded to, is to find a more fair form of taxation. I got in a bit of soup last week because I said I was irritated by one of the business lobby organizations who claims to speak for small business, who say on the one hand property tax is totally unfair, and on the other hand oppose any conversations that we can have with the province to create new forms of taxation. I was like, you can't have both. And I really believe that with goodwill, we'll be able to get out of this in a way where we can actually tax you on the value that you're creating instead of on an artificial input like rent or the value of your building.
Well, we need to do something, because I'm operated in the States and numerous cities around the province and NBC, and it's Calgary that's the biggest culprit of all of them. Edmonton was on the same page, but they're moving at a faster pace on eliminating it.
Yeah, they were a couple years ahead of us. So.
Yeah, we need to do something, because you have no idea the impact it's causing on a lot of the small businesses, particularly in A properties or B properties in shopping centers and food courts and the kiosks and stuff. We're paying a ton in rent, and our city's piling on.
That's super helpful for me to hear, because, of course, in your kiosks or in the food courts, your per square foot rent is higher. So, as you say, there's going to be real imbalances. And wouldn't it be shocking if with your 650 square feet, you were paying the same as one of the large stores that they gave incentives to incite?
What a concept. Fairness.
Terrible.
What a concept. Yeah.
Don, thanks so much for the call.
Thank you. Thanks for talking about that.
Thank you, Don, and thanks for the example. I've been talking about this a long time, but I'll use your example as we continue to talk to the province about this.
All right, then.
Thanks so much for joining the conversation, Don. There's no clear answer on when Don or people in his situation could see some sort of change?
I'm pretty, well, as I say, the one change is going through now. And if people do see the landlords are using this as an opportunity to jack up the rent even more, I need to know that.
Okay.
But the other thing is that I'm optimistic. We've got a new minister now. He seemed very keen on moving the file forward today. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to actually get something. You know, I'm here for 4 years, so I'm hoping that through that time we will have the ability to make this change, because it's fundamentally the wrong thing to do, and we've got to fix it.
If other people are in the same situation as Don, is there an outlet for them? Is there a way for them to be heard other than phoning in?
Well, phone in on Shaw. We do it twice a year. Send me a note, themayor@calgary.ca, with your example. But the other thing that I've got to say is, if you belong to a business lobby organization, tell them that these conversations are worthwhile and well worth having. Because when the business lobby organizations jump up and down and say, no new taxes, it really hinders our ability to move forward.
Okay, good point. Let's check in now with Phoenix over in the social media hemisphere there. Social media guy, how's it going?
Yeah, staying with the theme of price burdens, Donna takes a different perspective. In fact, she says, can we talk housing? And here's what she means. She realizes it's in the provincial portfolio, but needs local solutions. She says her rent went up substantially, and she's looking for options. Now, if you would like to tweet the mayor, you can do so. This is live, yeah. Hashtag Nenshi Live. Erin?
Wonderful. Now, where do we start with housing?
Well, you know, the one thing that keeps me up at night is the housing situation in Calgary. We had a rental vacancy rate before the floods at 1.7%, which is way too tight. You need to have a little bit of friction in the market, lubrication, if you like. And when that thing drops below 2.5 or so, it means rents are going to start going up. People are going to have a lot of trouble finding a place to live. And we haven't seen a really scientific measure of what has happened to vacancies, I should say, since the flood. We don't need it. It's close to zero. You know, there was one guy who contacted my office who said he put a basement suite on one of these rental websites, and in 2 days he had 1,800 emails. So we have a big problem. And the solutions are difficult. You know, we've been looking at all kinds of creative things, like creating temporary mobile home parks and so on. None of that seems particularly feasible. We've got to attack this structurally, and we've got to figure out why. We have to figure out why it is that we've got this supply-demand imbalance, that we're building lots and lots of housing. Housing starts are at record levels, but we're not building entry-level and rental housing. And certainly we're starting. This council approved the first new custom purpose-built rental apartment buildings downtown in a generation, and we've got several of them coming forward this year. So we've got to build more, but we also have to look at other ways to increase supply. And one of those is, I just have to say, I'm a landlord. I have a property that I rent near Mount Royal University. The rent that I charge is based on my mortgage payments and interest rates and my utilities payments and my condo fees. Well, guess what? The flood didn't increase any of those things. I haven't increased my rent in 3 years because I don't have to. And so I have to say to other landlords out there, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And be ethical with your tenants and what you're charging your tenants and how much money you're making off of the deal, because we are in a crisis. And we've got to fix that. And then the other thing, of course, how much time have we got? 30 minutes to go? Here we go.
The BS word.
The one thing I got to fix, and that I failed to fix so far, my biggest failure in office so far, is our failure to legalize secondary suites. It has to happen. Somewhere between 35 and 75,000 of our neighbors live in these illegal suites. And we have said, you know, that's okay. It's okay that these folks live without the legal protection that the rest of us enjoy. So if your if your smoke detector doesn't work, if there's mice, if there's mold, if your landlord is abusing you, if there's no heat, you have nowhere to turn. You have no recourse, because if you complain to the authorities, we'll rip out the cabinets and kick you out of your house. So we have to make sure that those folks who live there live in safe, decent places. Every other city in Canada has had the courage to do this, except Calgary and Burnaby, BC, and I don't want to be the last. So I'm really encouraging all of you, if you believe in safe and legal secondary suites in communities, contact your councillor. Because every poll shows that 70 to 80% of Calgarians agree with my point of view on this, legalize and regulate. But unfortunately, that remaining 20% seems to include 8 people on city council. And so contact your councillor, tell them this is important, and let's get this one done, and let's make sure that those places remain safe and decent and affordable places for our neighbors to live.
Right, we've been hearing the conversation about basement suites, secondary suites, whatever you want to call them. Do you see this changing from, we didn't get it done your first 3 years, do you see any movement with new council in terms of this?
It's a tough one. You know, what was the old rhyme? But for one horse, the kingdom was lost. So, but for one vote, I'm not sure that we're there yet. I hope that the new members of council will be open-minded and thoughtful on this. Certainly, as a minimum, we should legalize these around transit stations and universities, where the demand is the highest. Eventually, I believe we should do it citywide.
Okay. I think we are going to go now to the phone lines to Chad. Chad has a question somewhere along these same lines. Chad?
Hello.
Hi, what's your question for the mayor?
My question has to do with developers and whether you're looking at policies in limiting their greed, the greed machine on that. And my second question is also, are you ever looking at any policies about aldermen that are on the take, and if found out, will they be exited out the door?
Well, the good news is we don't have any aldermen anymore, just councillors. But,
Or counselors, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me talk about this. We need people to build in the city, and that's what the home builders and the developers do. And the vast majority of them are ethical and honest and want to build the best city. But this is an area where we need regulation because fundamentally, I'm a business professor, I'm a free market guy, I've worked in the private sector for a long time. But this is one of those areas where a pure private market doesn't work. And the reason for that is because you and I can buy a house, we can't buy a neighborhood. We have to choose from the neighborhoods on offer. And those neighborhoods have impacts on the city as a whole, on transit, on roads, on downstream impacts, so they have to be regulated. And so the good news is that the new neighborhoods that we're now building today are totally different from the stuff we were even building 10 years ago. A little more dense, still lots of backyards, lots of single-family homes, but much more financially and environmentally and socially sustainable over the long run. And we'll continue to do that. You're going to see a big debate. You're going to see a big debate in council over the next few months on something called growth management. And what growth management is, it's about saying we're going to actually grow sequentially in the city. So we'll do a whole bunch of growth in one direction, then a whole bunch of growth in another direction, instead of building 27 or 28 new communities all over the city all at once, because it's impossible to serve infrastructure. Ask the people in Mackenzie Town. Some of them have been there for 30 years. They're still waiting for decent transit. And so we have to segment that. And the developers don't like it one bit, because some of them don't own land in that direction, and they'll have to wait. But I think that it is absolutely the right thing to do. And I shouldn't say the developers don't like it. Most of them are okay with it. But there are still some that are lobbying hard against it. On the second question, long before I was the mayor, I have advocated for campaign finance reform to make political campaigns much more transparent and to take money out of politics as much as we can. The province has not yet been willing to do that. I've run my campaigns in 2010 and 2013 as though the new rules were in place. That's handicapped me very significantly. I could spend a lot less, I could raise a lot less. I disclosed the name of all of my donors before the vote so people knew. And I was really thrilled that in this election, even though the law didn't require it, nearly every single candidate disclosed their donors before the election. And of my council colleagues, I want to say that, I've never counted actually, but I think 12 out of the 15 of us disclosed our donors before the election. That's an important first step, but you got to keep your councillors honest. And I've put in a whole bunch of new ethical guidelines. They've all disclosed their donors. They now have to disclose any gifts they receive, as I do, and their expenses in their office. And it's up to citizens to keep an eye on those and make sure that if you say, Councillor so-and-so, I really don't like the fact that you went to a hockey game with all of these developers and they spent this much money on you. It's got to be citizens who tell people, because I believe that our first job is to be transparent and let everyone know.
Okay, and how do you think the councillors that you're working with now feel about that same? Was there any resistance that you felt when you put those new? Surprisingly,
and that was with the old council, and we
Right.
put them. The old council put them in to apply to the new council.
Right.
And surprisingly, I think it passed 14-1 or 13-2.
Okay.
And the people who voted against it were not people, well, I don't think anybody's on the take, but were certainly not people who were on the take. They just had some moral objections to that kind of disclosure.
Right.
But we're going to be doing it. I've been doing it anyway. I've been disclosing all my office expenses since I was elected. And we're going to keep doing that because I really believe that instead of banning things or saying you can't do this, the point is tell everyone. And if you've got a good reason and you say, look, at that hockey game, I managed to negotiate a deal for the city that was a big deal, go ahead and tell people that. Just open the veil as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, now.